Hello, BookTube. I've got another quick MegaStuff video for you here for Wednesday, and Wednesday, of course, is New Comic Book Day. I used to do regular comic book videos on this channel, but then the pandemic happened, and suddenly frivolous trips seemed out of the question. Even my beloved Brattle Bookshop usually was folded into some other kind of errand on its own. Once upon a time, before the pandemic, my local comic shop, a Newbury Comics comic shop, was on a route. It was on a route that I took to do a whole bunch of things all at once. I did it a couple of times a week. I'd been doing it for years, and I grew to like the young staff there, most of them, and liked the unexpectedness. You know, every week there'd be not only shipments of new comics, but also maybe shipments of some old remainders, new remainders that I hadn't seen before, things like that. I very much valued that. I liked it a lot, and was able to show you a bunch of stuff. But all the rest of those errands fell away in the course of the pandemic, and that isn't good enough for me to go. I don't follow or collect, read enough currently published comics to warrant going to my comic shop on its own, just as an isolated event, just as an isolated errand to do. So I pretty much stopped doing it, and that was a disastrous timing because it coincided with DC Comics finally publishing again the Legion of Superheroes, a version anyway of the Legion of Superheroes. Mark Richardson Reeves and his family were his wonderful wife were kind enough to step in, and they still go to their comic shop, and they were able to kind enough to step in and get me the latest issues of the Legion, and either hold it over for when Frida and I would go up to visit, or send them. And that's been wonderful. That has stopped me from probably making an exception and going to that comic shop. It's a hike, and it's annoying, and it's not connected to anything else, and nothing. It's not connectable to anything else either. So once I went there, no matter how much I enjoyed it, I would then have to walk out the door, turn on my heel, and come straight back home. And I didn't want to do that, so that's been a godsend. Ordinarily, that would lead me to believe that I wouldn't have much in the way of comics to talk to you about. But a long, long time ago, like in the early spring, at my Barnes and Noble, there's one big Barnes and Noble left in the city of Boston. It's in a mall called the Prudential Center, and I ordered a comic book, a collected issue comic book there, a long, long time ago. As soon as it came out, I ordered it. And they, like everybody else, their supply chains, their work systems have been badly, badly affected by the pandemic. And that order, which ordinarily take a few days, just didn't come in. It just didn't come in. I would inquire about it weeks, months later, and it just didn't come in. And then finally, it did. Their system kept the order and eventually fulfilled it. So I have this thing, even though I don't particularly need it. Two of you have sent me this whole run of comics digitally. So I have this run on multiple devices now. I have it backed up, so I have it to look at all the time without a physical copy taking up space on the shelf. But I figured that's a pusillanimous thing to say to a store that's trying to make its budget. So I got it. I got it, even though I don't particularly need it. It's an Epic collection from Marvel Comics. A really nice run of issues that they do. Well, they'll do full color paperback reprints of a volume of a stretch of some title or other from 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. The Epic collections, unlike the Masterworks, the Marvel Masterworks series, are not going in strict chronological order. They're bouncing all around. That adds an element of fun to it, to me. I have a whole stack of Epic collections. I really like them. I don't know that it's viable to have them anymore, since I have a lot of these issues electronically. But I figured I'd already ordered this, so I got it. And it's called This Beachhead Earth, but of the Avengers. This is a nice big volume of the Avengers. The title comes from one particular issue in this run, which doesn't have anything to do with the Black Panther. Here you have a classic cover. These issues were written by Roy Thomas, and they were drawn by John Buscema. Quite a few of them are, and some by his brother Sal Buscema. And the ones by John Buscema, quite a few of the issues in this volume are inked by Tom Palmer, who's a great inker, and his inking on Buscema's work makes it 10 times better. It was great anyway, but those issues are just gorgeous. And that was true for Tom Palmer no matter what. No matter who he inked, he tended to make their work just pop. Just added definition where it needed it, removed it where it didn't need it. It made a free use of all sorts of shading and shadowing. And so it's a delight to have this, because these things are in full color, as opposed to the essential volumes that Marvel made years and years ago that were really inexpensive. These are not. This was $40. Yes? Yeah. The essential volumes years and years ago were even bigger collections of Marvel back issues that were in black and white. And I got a lot of them. I had a huge stack of them. Until I realized, well, why are you doing that? Just because they're less expensive? The color is a huge part of why you do these things, why you like them. So, I gradually got rid of them all, except for my essential collections of the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, which, of course, I will not be getting rid of. Better to have these color volumes. And since I went to the bother of ordering it, and since I went to the bother of getting it, I reread these issues. Now, this Beachhead Earth, the title, comes from an issue of a 3 or 4 issue arc that's collected in this volume. That is the only thing that anybody remembers these issues for. And that is the Kree-Skrull War, where Earth and the Avengers are caught up in an intergalactic war between 2 warring alien species. And interestingly enough, from Roy Thomas' position, Earth doesn't play an all that pivotal role in that war. It's literally caught in the crossfire. But unlike so many other science fiction and comic book stories before then, Earth is this little backwater planet with no technology is not the key to the conflict. That was refreshing to read. That was nobody, I think, none of us reading those issues of the Kree-Skrull War 60 years ago had any idea that it would become so iconic a thing, or so iconic a story in Marvel as it has since become. But it did. And it's fun to revisit those here. This is a weird period in Avengers history. The presence of Thor and Iron Man on the cover there should not distract you from the fact that the core membership in these issues is largely stable. Thor and Iron Man make regular appearances, as does Captain America. You can't really have the Avengers without those three. But the bulk of these issues is taken up by an interesting cast of Avengers. There's T'Challa, the Black Panther, who's done really well in these issues. Really, really well. There's the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, the mutant brother and sister team who joined the team in issue number 16 and just kept going. There's the Vision, the superpowered android that is a member of the team. And there's Goliath, who is not, he's ability to grow to giant size, and he's not Hank Pym, the original Goliath, the original Giant Man, the original Ant-Man. Instead, he's Clint Barton, who was also joined the team in issue number 16 as Hawkeye the Archer. For a while, there was a period where Hawkeye wasn't interested in being an archer anymore, and he took a little of Hank Pym's growth serum, and it apparently worked wonders, and he became Goliath and was on the team. I would also say, just from an archetype standpoint, that an Avengers team without a giant in the ranks, you could almost whittle down an ideal Avengers team from these issues. You would want Captain America and Iron Man and Thor. Maybe not in every adventure, but you'd want them regularly appearing. You'd want Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. You'd want the Vision. You'd want Hawkeye, the Archer. You'd want T'Challa, but you'd also want a giant of some kind or other. But one way or another, I revisited these issues and remembered some of the problems that I had. One of them crops up right away in the very first issue. It's really, really good. The first issue is Heroes for Hire from June of 1970. And it starts with this great image. That is John Buscema and Tom Palmer. That is fantastic. That is Clint Barton Goliath smashing a fist into a condemned building and proceeding to tear it down. And so are all the other Avengers. They are tearing the building down. It turns out that they are in arrears on Avengers Mansion. They need to raise $200,000. And an evil industrialist has hired them to do impromptu demolition in the inner city. And they need the money, so they take the job. That's how the issue starts. But I remember back in 1970 reading this issue. I opened it like this, and even back then, a little sprout of a thing, because I'm only a sexy 28-year-old now. So you can just imagine how young I was in 1970. Math is complicated. We probably don't want to dwell on it too long. But I remember looking at this scene and thinking, okay, all right, how does this work? I've been reading the Avengers since issue number 1. Hank Pym, who was Ant-Man then, but who took on the identity of Giant Man and then Goliath, and so that he could not only shrink super small, but also grow super large, had been a member that whole time. And now now that it's not Hank Pym, somehow or other the bubble bursts, and now I have these questions even more. And the questions were, okay, all right, that's a great picture. Thanks to John Buscema's artwork, that's a great picture. So, Clint Barton is 6 feet tall. That's Hawkeye. He's 6 feet tall. Here, he's 30 feet tall. Okay, so he's 3 times as tall as he would ordinarily be. And he's slamming a fist into a building and demolishing it. And my question, I thought, when I first saw this, way back then, I thought, well, okay, he's 3 times as tall as he was, but concrete is a whole lot more than 3 times as dense as human flesh. So how is he able to do that? How is he able to do that? How is, and later on in this issue, I think it's in this exact issue. Let's find the spot. As long as I'm being nerdy about it, let's find the spot. Yes, okay, here's the issue. And then when we get to the big fight, yeah, there we go. There is Clint Barton again. He shoots up to 30 feet in height, stamps his foot to cause a little earthquake. The villain's henchmen turn their guns on him. And he's not in the panel, but they say, pepper him. He may be big, but he still ain't bulletproof. And another one of them says, but at that size, it'd take a mortar shell to make a dent in him. Meaning that he is bulletproof, that these bullets aren't having any effect. They're shedding right off his skin. And again, that made me think, well, okay, but at 6 feet tall, bullets don't shed off your skin. What is changing here? What is going on here? What explains this power? It's not even addressed in these issues, and that's okay. That's all right. But all that brought it back to me. And of course, this storyline, the issues introduce Carol Danvers of Cape Canaveral, who goes on to become Warbird and Ms. Marvel, and then Captain Marvel, as she is now, made a billion-dollar movie. She's introduced in here as just a civilian long before she gets any kind of superpowers. And also, Captain Marvel is introduced, or is in here, joins the Avengers in this team. He was a Kree soldier, and it's tangentially through him that the Avengers are involved in the Kree-Skrull War. And there are some issues here that are drawn by Neil Adams, who's not really cut out for Avengers for team books like this at all, but still, that's amazing to see. This back cover is Neil Adams' artwork. And these issues are terrific. They really are. They raise a lot of the same problems that I always have, largely with Thor. Whenever Thor appears, what do you do? If you've got some rinky-dink would-be world conqueror who has, Costco-level laser guns and a bunch of henchmen in identical uniforms, well, Thor's the 5,000-year-old god of thunder. He's not going to have any trouble with any of that. And yet, you not only have to have him have enough trouble to need teammates, but you've got to... The standard arc that Roy Thomas always employs is that the Avengers are first defeated, and they're first defeated, and then they come back from adversity. How's anybody going to defeat Thor? But yet, people regularly do. Nevertheless, this was a delight, an absolute delight. I've read these issues so many times, so many times, and they're not anything like comics are done today. There's no kind of accountability. Iron Man goes from being a guy in a metal suit, but the metal suit doesn't do anything. It doesn't make him extra strong. It doesn't make him extra fast. It isn't necessarily even laser proof, to a guy in a war armor that can do anything. Thor goes from just a guy who has a hammer to a god of thunder who can do anything. And also, in a few points in these issues, bless Roy Thomas's heart, although he got it from Stan Lee. It's always been the way with this particular character. At a few points in these adventures, the Avengers will be fighting some villain and his henchmen, and things will look really desperate. Their craft will look like it's getting away. There's a chance that maybe there's a bomb on board or something like that. We really need to figure this out. We really need to act, and then Thor will just kill them. He'll just kill them. And he says it in flowery language. He's calling down lightning from heaven, and he's saying, may the will of the god of thunder be followed, that sort of thing. But it doesn't matter. It's still plain out homicide. Nobody cares. Nobody pays any attention, and that has always been true. in his own book and in the Avengers. When Thor gets fed up, he kills people. And the anti-mutant attitude starts to crop up in these issues. The anti-mutant attitude that's all through Stan Lee's X-Men crops up because the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are mutants. Sometimes Roy Thomas lets that get the better of him. There are a couple of points in these issues where the Avengers are fighting a superpowered team of villains, and the villain who's fighting Quicksilver, always in these cases, the Avengers never act as a team. Never. They never act as a team. A very big change from the Fantastic Four, who always does. But in the Avengers, no. It's somebody will take a shot at a villain. Oh, that didn't work. I got knocked on my you-know-what. And then someone else will take a shot at the villain. And then a third person will take a shot at the villain. If they all took a shot at the villain at the same time, there'd be no competition. But a couple of times when the Avengers are fighting villains like that, superpowered villains like that, one of the villains will refer to Quicksilver or the Scarlet Witch as, well, now you're going to be defeated, you filthy mutie. And in a couple of those instances, I'm reading the panel, and I was back in 1970 and thinking, wait a minute, that villain is also a mutant and knows it. So what on earth is going on here? But largely, I loved it. When you take Iron Man and Thor out, then the only questions are silly questions that I love to ask. Why is Quicksilver so ineffective, for instance? I mean, I say Thor would have no problem with these people. Neither would Quicksilver. If he can run so fast that he can punch each one of 20 henchmen with rifles in a crowd 10 times, his hypermetabolism is healing his knuckles. So he runs up to you, he punches you 10 times. You're in a coma for the rest of your life. Goes over to the next person, punches them 10 times. You can do all that in less than 15 seconds. What could stand against him? And yet, many, many times in these issues, he will rush up to a villain, and the villain just swat him aside when they wouldn't even be able to see him, much less hit him. And I had my standing questions about where Goliath's power comes from. Yes, he can get taller, but why can he punch through concrete and metal? Why can he do that? And there's the Scarlet Witch's hex power, which Roy Thomas is the latest in a long line of writers to just make it anything. It can just be anything. She is the Deus Ex Machina in so many of these stories, where she throws a hex and just what they need to have happen happens. The days of Stan Lee writing her where she didn't know what her hexes were doing, they could often work against her, are long gone here. They are only going to work in her favor. But largely a joy. Even though I know these issues backward and forward, I'm glad to have this Epic collection. I doubt that I will ever order another Epic collection. Why would I, if I can get these things digitally? Or if I have them in some other form physically. As we pare down here at Hyde Cottage, as we become extra cautious, extra conscious of all of the stuff here, to try and limit the stuff here. But anyway, that was one MegaStuff video. I don't have many others. I don't have any rice cooker updates. The other day I made a fatal error with broccoli, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is. I either steamed it too much or steamed it too little. I will get the hang of it, and then I will make, maybe I'll put the tripod on the kitchen counter and show you how to do that. But I don't have any updates on that. I don't have any updates on NaNoWriMo. My update on NaNoWriMo yesterday holds through today. I'm having a blast. So all that's left really here is mail. So we have a couple of packages of mail. We can just go through those. No packages from civilians. These are from publishers. So we'll see what we have here. This first one is from Farrar, Straus and Giroux. Oh my God. Okay. All right. It's got 1 million blurbs. Good Lord. A huge number of blurbs. Pages and pages of them. And not from critics. All from professors and professional people. Former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and former United States District Judge for the Southern District of New York. Health and former distinguished professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, former member of Congress and CEO Emeritus of American Association for the Advancement of Science. Good Lord. All right, what's the book? Okay. All right, this is by Jed Rakoff. This comes out in late February. This is Why the Innocent Plead Guilty and the Guilty Go Free, and Other Paradoxes of Our Broken Legal System. Oh my. No wonder it has those kinds of blurbs. For more than 2 decades, Jed Rakoff has served as a federal district judge in the Southern District of New York Before his appointment to the bench, he worked as both a defense lawyer and a federal prosecutor. His range and depth of experience make him uniquely positioned to diagnose the most acute problems inherent in our justice system, and this is exactly what he does in this urgent, forthcoming book. He begins the book with an investigation of the first question of the title, showing how mandatory minimum sentencing, the prevalence of plea bargains, the outsized power of prosecutors, and the dearth of jury trials all results in the phenomenon of defendants pleading guilty even when they know they are innocent. One particularly shocking statistic cited by Judge Rakoff, of the more than 300 people whom the Innocence Project have proved were wrongfully convicted, around 10% originally pled guilty to serious crimes they did not commit. From there, Judge Rakoff explores a host of important issues, from the gross racial disparities in the use of the death penalty and the practice of non-prosecution agreements to address corporate malfeasance, to the ceding of power from the courts to the executive branch and the frequent unreliability of expert witnesses. Okay, this is going to be infuriating, but I can definitely attest to part of it, because in the Massachusetts courthouse, up on the upper floors of the Massachusetts courthouse, you will always see the hallways are entirely full of lawyers working things out. When the building is full of people who have been summoned for jury duty, but most of them are going to be dismissed. They're going to be sent home at noon with thanks for the court, with the judge's thanks. But they're not going to serve on a jury because all of those lawyers in the hallways are working things out without a jury. And that is, all right, well, this guy's uniquely positioned to know what he's talking about. All right, so I will learn a lot from this book next year. I won't be reading it ahead of time, but this comes out in February. Okay, a dark subject. We'll see if the next one is something lighter or not. You never can tell in a mail haul. We don't have the mail hauls that we once did pre-pandemic. But let's see. Let's see what this next one is. A slim thing. It's a... Oh my. Oh goodness. Okay, we don't have a pub sheet for this. No. Okay. This could be right up my alley. Kinda, sorta. All right, this is by Stephanie Ross. Who is Stephanie Ross when she's... Oh, what a picture. That's our author. Don't you want to hear what she has to say? I do. Look at that smile. That smile has seen a lot. She's a professor emerita of philosophy at the University of Missouri, St. Louis. She's the author of What Gardens Mean, also published by the University of Chicago. Oh no, she's going to guilt trip me for how many times I've promised I would start a garden and then not done it. All right. Unless maybe her book says gardens don't mean anything, in which case I'll be off the hook. This book is called Two Thumbs Up: How Critics Aid Appreciation. Steve is pleased. This is going well already. Let's see what we have here. Far from an elite practice reserved for the highly educated, criticism is all around us. Entirely true. Never been more so. We turn to online reviewers. Do we indeed? To decide which restaurants are best and to guide our movie choices, and we tune in to a host of voices on social media for critiques of political candidates, beach resorts, and everything in between. Yet even amid this ever-expanding sea of opinions, professional critics still hold considerable power in guiding how we make aesthetic judgments. Do they indeed? Only one of them should. But I'm glad of it. Steve is always right. So if you're one of those people who's guided by professional opinions, by the spouting of critics, you can pair off your list just one. Anyway, philosophers and lovers of art continue to grapple with centuries-old questions. How should we engage with works of art? What might enhance such encounters? Should some people's views be privileged? Who should count as a critic? And do critics actually help us appreciate art? In Two Thumbs Up, philosopher Stephanie Ross tackles these questions, revealing the myriad ways that critics influence our decisions and why that's a good thing. Starting from David Hume's conception of ideal critics, Ross refines his position and demonstrates how aesthetic and philosophical concerns... There's nothing in my criticism that's philosophical in any way. Shape our interactions with art, ultimately arguing that advice from properly placed critics is best route to rewarding experience. Okay. All right. Two thumbs up. How critics aid appreciation. So I imagine this will be mostly about art. Is that right? It'll be mostly about art. Does this have a... it does. It has an index. Let's look up the simple word kakutani. That ought to tell us. how much this is going to be about the written word. Yes, Kakutani is not in here. Okay, so who is? Alan Goldman. David Hume, no mention of Christopher Hitchens. Emily Brady. Noel Carroll. All right, well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I'm up for it, even if it's art criticism. I'm still up for it. It would. The thing I'll be curious about here is how much of this is involved with written criticism, and we shall see. Oh, what about Hughes? Let's look up Hughes and see. Robert Hughes gets 2 mentions in here. Ernest Hemingway gets a mention. Stephen Hawking gets a mention. Mark Haddon. Well, it doesn't have to be book criticism. This will be interesting anyway, and anything that this author thinks up about art criticism, music criticism, and food criticism will apply to book criticism. I'm a little bit leery because there was a book specifically about book criticism earlier this year, Inside the Critics Circle, that was an oddly lifeless thing. I didn't understand why it didn't. It should have been my favorite book of the whole year, and it wasn't by a long shot. Instead, it was boring. This doesn't strike me as an author. This doesn't strike me as a person who writes boring books. So we shall see. We shall see. I will check the date on this, but I'm going to read it tonight anyway. I'm going to read it and find out tonight anyway. My one worry here is that it will be too philosophical. Yeah, i.e. philosophical at all. But when the subtitle here, How Critics Aid Appreciation, is not a philosophical subject, I would argue that critics of anything aid your appreciation of anything through gaining your trust. I don't believe that a 5-star critic, or I saw one of you sent me a link that, oh no, I saw it on the Google opening page. When you go to Google, you'll get all those random things on the opening page, and one of them was an article called, with the horrifying title, Siri, Recommend Me a Good Book. I have always maintained that people who are busy, being productive citizens, raising children, taking care of their parents, going to a job, going to classes, taking care of their body, exercising, spending time, doing healthy things, don't have the bandwidth. They rely on critics who concentrate more on those things, but not just willy-nilly. The way that a critic aids appreciation is if you have built up a trust in that critic, so that you don't think, well, I'm sacrificing my own critical judgment to someone else's. No, instead you think, I have used my critical judgment not on everything that's out there, which I couldn't possibly do with all the other stuff I'm doing. Instead, I've used my critical judgment on this critic. And this critic, I trust. That takes time to do, and not everybody does that. That's not every reviewer on Reddit or Goodreads or Amazon. That's not every Yelp review. That takes time to do, to build up trust. And I wonder how much of this that will be about. I wonder if that's the kind of critic this author has in mind. 2 thumbs up. I'm all for it. I will read it tonight. This one, no. This one's going to wait until next year. But that's two slim works of nonfiction for Nonfiction November. And that's the mail. There could be more mail today. They would have to navigate the eternal construction outside, but they could do it. So there might be more mail. One way or another, I'm going to wrap this up for now. This is plenty long enough, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.